Kamali, taking you through some of the things people are talking about and some of the stuff they're sharing around the world on Newsfeed today. A family from Sri Lanka have become symbols of Australia's hardline immigration policy. A Sikh MP goes viral in the UK for his questioning of the British Prime Minister.
Take a bag and get you checked into first class.
We can't afford this. So your family is rich?
We're comfortable.
That is exactly what a super rich person would say.
And the writer of the first Crazy Rich Asians film won't be getting crazy rich from the sequel. We'll tell you why.
The biggest developers in all of Singapore.
And top of our newsfeed, Priya and Nades. Now, two people you've probably never heard of unless you're in Australia. They've become the names and faces of Australia's hardline immigration policy. They're Tamils who fled persecution in Sri Lanka, met in Australia, got married and had two little girls. Now, for about 4 years, while their asylum claims were being processed, they lived in a small Queensland town called Biloela. But about a year ago, they were put in a Melbourne detention centre, and last week the Australian government tried to deport them. As the family were on the plane about to go to Sri Lanka, a court injunction grounded it. And now Priya and Nades are waiting for a court verdict due on Friday, which will determine their future. Well, in the past 2 decades, the Australian government has taken an increasingly tough stance on refugees and asylum seekers and has been accused of violating international obligations. And members of the public, while divided, are in some way responsible as they voted for these anti-immigration politicians. But the case of Priya and Nades, there has been widespread outcry. Now, earlier today, we spoke with Helen Davidson from The Guardian in Australia.
I think this case has been unique in that the country's really gotten to know who they are. A lot of these cases, especially people who are in detention, very little is known about them. Visits are restricted, information is restricted, they're often referred to by pseudonyms in court documents. There's not really a chance for people to humanise these stories and to put a face on them. That's very different with this family. Priya and Nades are now well known across the country. There've been interviews with them, videos of their children, videos with their friends and families here. And then a video last week that was quite shocking, actually, that leaked out of the deportation attempt itself showed Priya being separated from her children and her children screaming. Priya was not allowed to sit with her children to comfort them. She was kept in a separate part of the plane. It was really quite, dramatic and distressing footage. And I think, this is a unique case in that sort of access and vision of what the government policy actually means when it's being enacted on real people. I think that's really cut through. In this case, the Labor opposition has really jumped on board in supporting the cause for this family to be granted an exception to live here. They've called for the minister to use his incredible powers. He has, they're colloquially referred to as God powers, to grant them a discretionary allowance to actually stay here, to override the court rulings. The debate between the two sides has gotten quite personal. Because this is a bit of a departure from Labor's normal stance, which is often quite supportive of the coalition's border policies. They've been labelled hypocrites, populists, but then on the other side, religion has been brought into it as well. And Christina Keneally, who's the opposition spokesperson for immigration, she's a deeply religious person as herself, and she's called on Prime Minister Scott Morrison, who's an evangelical Christian. She's appealed to his Christianity to take a softer approach with this family.
I'm calling upon him to reflect upon the parable of the Good Samaritan, which invited us as Christians to take care of the stranger in our land.
I don't think that politically there's a way out of this where the government can allow them to stay while still saving face. We don't know what the court is going to do tomorrow, whether it's going to extend an injunction, we're not even quite sure whether it can order the department to reassess the refugee claims of the youngest daughter, and that's what this one is centred around. I don't think the situation's looking very good for this family and their desire to stay in Australia. The issue of returning Tamils to Sri Lanka is quite a contentious one in Australia. We've returned thousands, rejected their refugee claims and sent them back. But there are also several cases of people being returned and arrested and detained on arrival. There have been some reports of disappearances, continued persecution of people. It's hard to know specifically with this couple how much danger they are facing, but they've repeatedly said that they're very scared to go back.
Okay, let's take a look at some of the other things that caught our eye on social media. Now, staying in Australia, a woman is suing her neighbours because she's gone vegan and doesn't like her neighbours cooking meat. Well, she's got herself into a bit of a beef. A Facebook group is planning a community barbecue on the street outside her house to fire her up. 2,000 people have said they're coming for the fry-up. The actor Jeremy Renner has created an app for his fans. It's linked to his Spotify playlist, his fan site, his Insta, his Twitter and his YouTube, kind of like a digital version of the Corey hotline from The Simpsons. Anyway, it's been taken down because people have been trolling it, and that has made Jeremy upset. Now, there was a moment in the UK House of Commons yesterday which cut through all the Brexit bluster and exposed some of the sentiments of the current Prime Minister and some of the sentiments that he's espoused.
Mr. Speaker, if I decide to wear a turban, or you decide to wear a cross, or he decides to wear a kippah or a skull cap, or she decides to wear a hijab or a burqa, does that mean that it is open season for right honourable members of this House to make derogatory and divisive remarks about our appearance? For those of us who from a young age have had to endure and face up to being called names such as Towelhead or Taliban or coming from Bongo land, we can appreciate full well the hurt and pain felt by already vulnerable Muslim women when they are described as looking like bank robbers and letterboxes. So rather than hide behind sham and whitewash investigations, when will the Prime Minister finally apologise for his derogatory and racist remarks? Racist remarks, Mr. Speaker, which have led to a spike in hate crime. And given
I speak as somebody who is not only proud to have Muslim ancestors, but to be related to Sikhs such as himself. And I'm also proud, Mr. Speaker, to say that under this government we have the most diverse cabinet in the history of this country. And, Mr. Speaker, what we have yet to hear from anywhere in the Labour Party is any hint of apology for the virus of anti-Semitism that is now rampant in their ranks. And I would like to hear that from the honourable member opposite.
Now, a couple of weeks ago, the Indian government withdrew the disputed region of Kashmir's autonomous status and imposed a curfew. Now, politicians are being arrested. Take a look at this.
The absence of dead bodies and blood on the street doesn't mean the situation is normal and people are happy.
जिन्होंने आज तक हिंदुस्तान जिंदाबाद कहा है, जिन्होंने आज तक नारेबाजी की है, जिन्होंने आज तक टीका लगाया है, जिन्होंने आज तक भजन गाए हैं, वही लीडर्स सब हिंदुस्तान कहने वाले यहाँ पे आज कैद बंद में यहाँ पे मौजूद हैं इस टाइम।
Let's go around the world now for some other stories you need to know this Thursday. As fires continue to burn in the Amazon, two of the region's tribes, the Quiapo and the Panada, say they're putting aside their differences to focus on a common enemy, the government of Jair Bolsonaro. They say the situation is dire as the president has relaxed environmental protection laws, made clearing land easier, and is drastically reducing indigenous communities' territory within the rainforest. And a tech agency says it's developed a chip which can be placed in the cabs of logging vehicles to monitor their real-time location. The chip uses the UN's open-source mapping database and could, if installed in trucks in the Amazon, show where they are in protected areas. The chip could even shut down the engine of said vehicle if it's in a place that it shouldn't be. The city of San Francisco has declared the National Rifle Association a domestic terror organization. The NRA is the lobby group which works for the benefit of weapons manufacturers. At least 53 people were killed last month in the United States in mass shootings. Despite epidemic numbers, the NRA continues to make sure as many people as possible are able to buy weapons and ammunition. And Elizabeth Warren, the presidential candidate in the United States, was taking part in a CNN event the other day and had a takedown of the fossil fuel industry in response to a question about light bulbs.
There are a lot of different pieces to this, and I get that people are trying to find the part that they can work on and what can they do, and I'm in favor of that, and I'm going to help and I'm going to support. But understand, this is exactly what the fossil fuel industry hopes we're all talking about. That's what they want us to talk about.
YouTube has taken down 100,000 videos containing hate speech and closed 17,000 channels for breaking its new stricter guidelines. The company owned by Google has credited increased vigilance by monitors and its AI. The site has been criticized for hosting hate content, conspiracy theories, and gratuitous violence, next to videos of people knitting. So it's trying to make the platform less of a free-for-all. Now, one of the ways the site was a free-for-all was in the way it pushed products to children after illegally collecting their data. It sold that data to advertisers who would then try to sell stuff to children. YouTube has been slapped with a record $170 million fine by the US Federal Trade Commission. It's promised to assume that anyone who watches kids' content is in fact a kid and therefore not violate their privacy by collecting, storing, or selling their data. And last up, the amazingly successful movie Crazy Rich Asians was always going to be a big money-making sequel, a big money-making sequel. But the studio's choice of writers, or rather its choice of how to pay those writers, has proved to be a problem.
There's nothing more compelling to a man than a vulnerable woman. Observe.
Hollywood has upped its game in the past few years, with more leading roles for women and people of colour in 2018 than ever before. 39 of last year's 100 highest-grossing movies feature a female lead or co-lead. That's up from 33 in 2017 and just 20 films in 2007. It shows that public pressure on the industry for more inclusivity seems to be working.
The world is changing.
Films like Black Panther, Captain Marvel, and Crazy Rich Asians opened at #1 at the box office in the US.
Take a bag and get you checked into first class.
We can't afford this. So your family is rich?
We're comfortable.
That is exactly what a super rich person would say.
But Adele Lim, who co-wrote the screenplay for Crazy Rich Asians, has pulled out of the planned sequel after discovering that her co-writer, Peter Chiarelli, was earning at least 8 times more than her. According to The Hollywood Reporter, Lim's starting salary was $110,000, while Chiarelli was offered $800,000 to $1 million.
Being evaluated that way can't help but make you feel that's how they view my contributions.
Some say this pay gap isn't surprising. Studios usually decide how much to pay writers based on their experience. Before Crazy Rich Asians, all Lim's work had been for TV shows, like One Tree Hill and Private Practice.
Move!
Where Chiarelli has written several movies, including hit rom-com The Proposal. It's reported that Chiarelli offered Lim half his salary, but she declined.
Pete has been nothing but incredibly gracious, but what I make shouldn't be dependent on the generosity of the white guy writer. If I couldn't get pay equity after CRA, I can't imagine what it would be like for anyone else.
So it seems not every Asian will get crazy rich working in the movie business.
That will do from the Newsfeed team. Reach out to me with your questions, comments, complaints and suggestions. You'll find me at Kamali Melbourne. You can find us on YouTube, you can subscribe to our channel, and you can follow me on Twitter. Follow, subscribe and add. See you again tomorrow.